Good afternoon and welcome to our series today on developing business in a virtual landscape. As we take a look at what we have all been through in the last 6 months, Lana and I find it very interesting that there are certain and specific companies that have really taken advantage of our new landscape. You look at Peloton, you look at Zoom, you look at some of the home tutoring businesses that have had exponential growth, and all of them share one commonality, and that's taking a look at the disruption that we're currently all involved in, and instead of being depressed about all of the negativity that comes as a result of it, really looking at the opportunity that may exist. This year, it seems like it's more than just COVID that we have all experienced. There have been killer bees, there have been wildfires, there have been hurricanes, intense heat for some of us here on the West Coast. As I mentioned, some of us are educating kids at home, we're supervising spouses at home, we're doing all of these things which just add another layer of stress to our normal job and responsibilities. Disruption is one of those elements that we believe will always be an element in the roles that we play. Whether you're an in-house marketing professional or whether you're a practitioner, the next 60 minutes, we really want to give you some excellent ideas on how to better utilize your skills and resources that are available to you in developing relationships, developing business, now that more of the element is virtual.
And we want this to be a conversation. So we'll have some polls throughout, and we really want you to be participating within those. And also please use the chat if you have any questions or if you have thoughts as we go through this.
Very quickly, just to refresh all of your memories, I'm Jonathan Fitzgarrald, managing partner of Equinox Strategy Partners. For more than 15 years, I was in-house in a business development role at 3 different large firms. And in 2015, I launched Equinox Strategy Partners to essentially bring business development coaching and training to a variety of legal, accounting, and business management firms.
And I'm Lana Manganiello. I'm a business development specialist with the firm, a coach as well, and I'm focused on working with accountants and lawyers. I've led business development efforts, both as a rainmaker and as a coach in a variety of professional service disciplines, including financial services and construction. So I tend to bring a different perspective to my work. I've also spent 20 years doing business development personally, so the strategies that I share are not theoretical. These are things that I've utilized myself.
Okay, so let's jump into the first of 3 topics that we would like to cover today. The first one is the elevated role of business development. Lana and I believe that anytime there is transition or disruption within a marketplace, clients, prospects, and even referral sources look to trusted advisors for sage advice, for level-headedness, for ultimately solutions that will help them personally and their businesses continue to grow. And one of the elements that we believe has come out of the COVID experience is an opportunity to connect with people more on a one-to-one basis. In times past, many times marketing programs and marketing initiatives will include one-to-many, where maybe it's an article that you're blasting out on behalf of yourself or behalf of one of the practitioners at your firm. Maybe it's a webinar that is being shared. It's one-to-many. And if there's one thing that COVID has taught us, and as a result of all of the feedback that we've gotten from our clients over the last 6 months, the critical role of developing or furthering relationships more on a one-on-one basis tends to be where practitioners are having success. And so as we go about talking about these different ideas from a virtual perspective, just think about what you can do within your individual role to take the experience down to a more personal level where it's more one-on-one and less one-on-many. All right. We've got our first poll. We're looking for what your thoughts are on this first question. What are your concerns regarding business development today? If you'll take a second and answer that, I think it'll be interesting to see which of these seem to be the most in the forefront of our mind.
Okay, we'll give you about 5 more seconds to get it in there.
Jonathan, I don't want to buck the hypo, but there may not be an appropriate answer.
That's true too, Mark. Thank you for mentioning that. But of the ones that we've given you.
Don't buck the hypo.
Right.
Okay, so we'll end this poll.
These are all different responses that Lana and I have gotten from clients and from contacts over the last 6 months in particular. And I think they're all valid ones. They're all ones that we're dealing with right now. If you see on the slide, the first concern that we've listed there is this idea that I'm already too busy with the work that's currently on my desk. Why would you ever suggest to me that I should be out there looking to develop more businesses in this environment? And our response to that is, we're thrilled that you're currently busy. That's always a positive. And we want you to focus on the work that is currently on your desk. There's no question that it deserves the priority. However, just because you're busy today does not necessarily mean that you're going to be busy tomorrow, that you're going to be busy in the fall, that you're going to be busy Q1 of next year. And so constantly having your pipeline filled with different opportunities, and sometimes that pipeline means not necessarily lining up matters and lining up opportunities, but making sure that you're keeping relationships within your network warm so that if you ever do have to rely on them, that it doesn't feel awkward to reach out to someone that you haven't spoken with in 12 months and all of a sudden you now care about them. All of a sudden you want an update on them. If you can keep these relationships warm during any given season, then the outreach seems a lot more genuine, it seems a lot more natural, and you don't have to apologize for not being in contact. The next one that we hear a lot about too is, you know what, things are so crazy right now, and I don't really want to bug people that are in my network. I'm just going to put a pause in my marketing and business development, and let's see what January 2021 looks like. Again, if you're going for that trusted advisor role, trusted advisors don't only pop up when it's convenient to them. In fact, if anything, being a trusted advisor is more critical during times when things are uncertain and uneasy rather than the good times. It's easy to be a trusted advisor. It's easy to be a resource for your network when everything is going great. Now, all of a sudden, something happens, there's disruption. Lana and I believe that if there's ever a time to double down on your outreach and to be a resource to someone, it's now.
Some of our clients' concerns have to do with the fact that they're unsure how to do business development without meeting in person. A lot of our clients get a majority of their new business opportunities through large conferences throughout the year, or they're involved in organizations that primarily meet in person. So as we go through this, we'll be discussing ways to look at business development from a socially distanced perspective. Another thing that we hear a lot is that you don't want to come across as insensitive or salesy. Obviously, we're all going through something at some degree, and it varies, and so you don't want to reach out to your contacts and appear to be tone deaf to what's going on and come across as someone looking for business.
There are also some of us that just aren't quite sure what to do. We have spent a ton of time creating a great network. We've got very close contacts, some of whom are clients that in some cases may have even become friends. We're so close to them that sometimes it may not be totally obvious as to how we can be of service. And we don't want to just reach out haphazardly. When we do reach out, we want to provide value. This is where I think your business development coaches or your in-house business development professionals, if you're at a larger organization, can really come in handy. Brainstorm with these professionals. Give them a sense for the different relationships that you have in your network, and don't feel like all the pressure is on you to come up with all of the brilliant ideas. Not sure how to be of service and coming up with strategies around reaching out is also a great topic for practice group meetings, for industry group meetings. If you're part of a mastermind that meets, proposing that to the group to see what other professionals in your field are doing are all really great ways of brainstorming how you may be of better service to those for whom you serve. All right, the next thing that we want to chat a little bit about are some of the opportunities that come as a result of what we're currently going with right now. I don't know how many of you spend any time on social media at all, but you've probably seen that those for whom were never on LinkedIn, now all of a sudden you're seeing them more often. Those that you used to see all the time on LinkedIn now seem to be on LinkedIn 300 or 400% more than they ever have been. The point here, folks, is that because people are sheltered in place, because they're not traveling for business and doing all kinds of other things with their time, they seem to be way more accessible. This is a great opportunity for you to perhaps reach out to those professionals that you've rubbed shoulders with in the past. Maybe it's someone for whom you filled out an RFP or an RFQ and they didn't choose you back then. This would be a great time to reach out to them. Maybe it's someone who's a prospect on your business plan or someone that you've always wanted to represent, but you've never found a warm introduction into them. People now, for whatever reason, seem to be more accessible. And so in my opinion, and Lana's opinion, now would be the time to find a creative way of reaching out and getting back on that person's radar. Another opportunity that is before us is, because of the disruption and the transition that's going on throughout the world, there are all kinds of new problems for us as trusted advisors to solve. Businesses and individuals are dealing with issues that they've never had to deal with before. Maybe their current outside counsel is not properly positioned to advise them on those new issues. Maybe their current outside counsel aren't in contact with them, out of sight, out of mind. And so as you look for different ways of taking advantage, and I mean that in an appropriate way, taking advantage of the opportunities that are before us, just remember that you may have a specific skill set or experience that positions you perfectly to take advantage and to advise those in your network for whom you haven't advised before. They've got problems, they've got to be solved by somebody. It might as well be you versus one of your closest competitors.
So another silver lining of all of this is that video calls are now much more the norm. Many of us, if we tried to schedule a prospect or a client for a Zoom call a year ago, it wouldn't have been received quite as positively as it is now, which is a huge benefit because 70% of communication is nonverbal. So we lose so much, you know, if we're only communicating via email or even on the telephone. So the fact that, you know, we're able to have these Zoom meetings or whatever platform that you're using to see face-to-face to have a discussion is a huge plus. Another opportunity is the fact that we're all in this together, as far as, you know, staying at home and everything that comes with the current pandemic situation, which really creates this shared experience, which makes an instant commonality with the people that you're reaching out to, and you're able to connect with them on a human level. You know, oftentimes you're meeting them within their home, and you're able to talk on a more intimate level, which creates more trust and fosters genuine relationships that turn into more meaningful connections. One thing that I am very happy about, given this circumstance is the fact that I can have initial meetings that are only 10 minutes where, you know, before you may have reached out to somebody who you thought might be a good connection, or you were introduced and you schedule lunch, and you can tell within the first 5 minutes that you probably will never do business together. You're not compatible. But then you have to sit through lunch and it's awkward. So now, you know, 10 minutes in, you've both kind of shared what you do and your thoughts on life. And it's not that awkward to say, this has been wonderful. I'm so glad we were able to connect and I'd love to stay in touch. And you're off, you know, with the rest of your day, 10 minutes in.
From a geographical perspective, Lana's right too. These meetings that you're putting yourself out there for, you're never quite sure how they're going to result. If you live in a major metropolitan area, getting to that meeting may also take you 15, 20, 30, 40. We're in LA. In a lot of instances here, it seems like an hour and a half to get to anywhere in town. And so all of a sudden, a 10-minute introduction meeting can very quickly turn into half of your day. The other issue from a no distance or travel obstacle perspective is that the world now becomes, in some instances, your oyster. Although we would never want you to put yourself out to the entire world because we think it spreads you too thinly, but in terms of identifying opportunities either throughout the country or in different geographical areas or districts that you've never considered before is less of an obstacle. If you've got more of a federal practice, or if practitioners in your firms have more of a federal based practice, then having more of a nationwide reach could be more of a plan right now than it ever has been before. Okay, so that just gives you kind of a snapshot of some of the things we're dealing with, but yet they're counterbalanced by some of the opportunities that are out there, which leads us to our next poll. Which do you feel are the biggest opportunities for you since the beginning of this pandemic started? Go ahead and take a minute or so to answer. And for the Mr. Hankins on the call, there may be an option up there, or that is not up there, that could also be the case.
If there's a silver lining particular to you, please share it in the chat.
Looks like the no distance or travel obstacle seems to be pretty popular with a bunch of you on the call here. Followed by video calls are now the norm. We will talk about the positive and the negative of that in just a minute. You're not all doing what you're supposed to be doing, by the way. How's that for a little precursor?
All right, well, it's been a minute, so I'll wrap up the poll and I'll share these results.
I think essentially one of the things we're getting at here is no matter how quickly we get back to the new abnormal, no matter when that happens, how much of the normal will truly be back to how it was, let's say, the end of last year, business has changed forever. To what degree, we're not sure. But as a result of that, we really have a choice to make. We can either say to ourselves, we're going to put our head down in the sand with the hopes that at some point this weather is going to blow over, then we will reemerge and see what the status is. Or we can say to ourselves, you know what, things are changing. We may or may not be controlling them, but let's go ahead and figure out how much of it we can embrace. Let's look for those silver linings. Let's look for those opportunities that are right under the surface and are available to us if we will be willing to change our procedures, change our policies, be more inclusive of different ideas and ways of doing things than we have ever been before. All right. The next thing that we'd like to address is the three options that we're going to be talking about: growing existing relationships, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, video call best practices, and then also, what do you do about developing and expanding your network with new relationships altogether? And what are some of the challenges of that now that many of us have to do it virtually? One of the first things that we have to remember, and this is really more of a refresher for you than something new altogether, is keeping the clients and the relationships that you have right now is the quickest way to revenue. It's the quickest way to continuing to be productive and to have steady flow. A lot of times as business development trainers and coaches, and for some of our competitors, we're constantly beating our clients over the head with look for new relationships, look for new avenues to pursue business, when in fact there could be a tremendous amount of work with the current clients and the current relationships that we have. So never forget that your best opportunities are likely to come from those for whom you already know. They know you, they like you, they trust you. They're likely willing to keep you busy if you'll do a good job staying in contact with them.
So the second category that we want you to make sure you're paying attention to as you're considering how to develop your existing relationship is leveraging your current network. So you've spent your career building your network. It's critical that you pay attention to and foster those relationships, because when you're staying top of mind with your current contacts, that's the only way you're going to uncover direct and indirect opportunities, along with referrals to potential clients and to referral partners.
The third one that we have up here is how do we expand work with current clients? As part of our coaching and training, we're constantly encouraging our clients to look for opportunities to expand current relationships. That may either be within their area of specialty, or maybe it's by suggesting work that one of their colleagues could do. It could even be suggesting someone outside of the firm too. You're continuing to provide value. You're continuing to show to that client that you're relevant and you're thinking about their business. And we will share with you a few different ideas during our call today about how to exactly do that. But definitely developing and furthering the relationships that you have right now is the first key to think about.
So studies show,
go ahead, Lana.
Well, I was just going to mention that studies show that repetition leads to familiarity and likability. So the higher the frequency of your touches, the better, because people work with and refer professionals that they like.
You'd be surprised how many times we'll meet with a client, business manager, lawyer, accountant, and we'll go over kind of a list of the most important contacts that they have in their network. And I'll ask quite frequently, how often are you in touch with any of these people? And as we go through the list, someone will mention, well, I see her at a conference once a year, or I met with him 4 years ago when I had taken a family vacation back to the East Coast and I wrapped in a couple business meetings. Folks, with as busy as people are right now and with as noisy as the environment is, you can expect someone to think of you, cannot expect someone to think of you when you see them once a year or when the last time you visited them was 4 years ago. It's not always the most competent professional that gets hired. It's oftentimes the professional that gets hired or referred that is top of mind in someone's network. And so just remember, you know, this idea, particularly for in-house marketers that are meeting with their practitioners, when that practitioner comes back and says, I saw that person 2 years ago at such and such a conference, continue to encourage them to check in. If they have absolutely no reason to do it, then it's just an update. Hey, would love to jump on a 10-minute Zoom with you and get an update about your practice, get an update about the firm, get an update about something specific that all of us are dealing with right now. But look for that opportunity to connect and get back top of mind with those individuals in your network that are absolutely critical to its success.
Okay, so now we'll get into ways to stay top of mind.
There are literally a million different ways that staying top of mind with those for whom you serve can come about. A lot of times, Lana and I like to encourage our clients to do things that are within their comfort zone, that they're actually excited about doing. That could mean authoring an article. If you love to write and either your coach or your in-house professional says, listen, you should be writing more articles for legal or business or industry publications, what we would suggest during this very specific time is take that article writing idea to the next level. Instead of you being the solo byline on that article, reach out to your network. Maybe there's a referral source that swims in the same pond that you do that would have a different perspective that you can include into your article and co-author the article together. Maybe there are a couple people on your prospect list that you're looking to be more relevant to, that you would love to spend some more time with, but you look for a reason to do it. Invite them to participate on a webinar with you or with your firm. If it's a client alert that you're drafting, maybe include someone else's perspective in it. It could be a colleague. It could also be someone from outside of your firm. But really taking a look at everything that you're doing and asking yourself, who else within my network can I include to take this activity up a notch? Yes, it may be a little more time intensive. Yes, it may take a little bit more coordination, but folks, the more you can get others involved in what you're doing, the more they'll have skin in the game, and the more they'll be willing to also share some of that with their network as well. So in so doing, you're not only servicing your network, but you're expanding your visibility outside of those for whom you know.
Collaboration is definitely something that we see that's underutilized, because as Jonathan said, it's a great way to bolster your relationship with the collaborator. You're upping your credibility, and again, getting exposure to that collaborator's network could be very meaningful for you. So business development efforts beyond one-on-one outreach now need to be highly personalized, thoughtful, and intentional. So the virtual large networking groups or large virtual happy hours, for the most part, they've already been done and have served their purpose. So ways to be super conscientious and intentional about your interactions.
Yeah, and if you're sitting on the Zoom right now and you're thinking to yourself, you've done a really crappy job of reaching out to your network in the last 6 months, or if you're an in-house marketing business development professional and you're meeting with one of your practitioners and they happen to mention that they've done a terrible job staying in contact and they almost feel a little embarrassed now all of a sudden reaching out, at the end of the day, you got to start somewhere. If you have to fall on your own sword, you know, be the mea culpa and suggest to someone for whom you're reaching out that you've done a crappy job staying in contact, but you're trying to change that. There's no time like the present to do it. Waiting 6 more months is not going to get any better. And so if you do feel a little guilty about that, start as soon as this video call is over. And for the most part, any of our clients that Lana and I have suggested be very proactive about reaching out to, whether it's someone that they spoke to 2 weeks ago or someone from law school that they haven't contacted in 20 years, we have yet to have a client come back and say, oh my God, you guys, that was a total disaster. I can't believe you advised me to do that. More often than not, in fact, I can't think of a negative experience right now. More often than not, our clients come back and say, oh my God, the other person was so appreciative that I reached out. They found it to be so thoughtful. We had a great time catching up. And you as the person that initiated that, it also builds your self-confidence. It also refreshes your energy so that not everything that we're dealing with is doom and gloom, I should probably say. It can do as much for your mental health as it can for others that you're reaching out and being a resource to. Okay, our next slide is, the purpose of it is to give you a few ideas on really intentional and thoughtful ways of reaching out. Lana mentioned earlier in the video call that being more intentional with individual people in your network seems to be what is perceived to be the best right now and what ends up in more work or more referrals. And so over here on the right of your slide, we give you kind of the next phase of intentional interactions. We mentioned that the happy hours, the virtual happy hours have kind of been done. All of those things that maybe we did during May and June and August have probably been done. And so in terms of taking it up a notch, look for opportunities to really relate to someone on a one-on-one basis. We've got clients that are organizing cooking classes. We've got a bunch of celebrity chefs, both on the East Coast and on the West Coast with the clients that we serve. And some restaurants and some commercial kitchens are putting together small groups to where the ingredients are delivered to you the morning of the event. And part of the cooking class is not only opening up the box to see what kind of ingredients are before you, but also the fun of trying to do something with those ingredients, good or bad, with other people for whom you're trying to relate. The same goes with some of these spirit or wine classes where there'll be an expert, a sommelier or a mixologist on the call. They're explaining and giving context and background to different ingredients. Again, it's just a very lighthearted, natural, genuine way of interacting with another person. We even have one client that wants to continue with their annual retreat this year. Obviously, it has to be done virtually, but they want to do something that continues to encourage the firm's culture and relationships within the firm. And so they found an organization that hosts a murder mystery dinner, but all virtual. I haven't attended it. I haven't heard back as to how that's going to work. It seems a little complicated to me, but the vendor suggests that it works perfectly. And it's just something a little bit different from the norm that gets people excited.
So one of the other examples I've seen is a short story club where people meet regularly to discuss an article that has been shared or a short story along a particular theme. Also, I think David in the chat mentioned peer-to-peer short groups to solve a common problem. So I think that's a great idea, and certainly, you know, working with your children in distance learning is a great support group where you can discuss the challenges of facilitating distance learning, or maybe you just get together and cry and drink. But definitely this idea of getting together to solve a problem on a professional level would be, I think, a great suggestion. Having a travel club, so obviously most of us are kind of stuck where we're at, so reminiscing on travels past, where everyone brings a handful of photos that they want to share with the group, with some stories of why this was such a special group, such a special trip. So, you know, the meals, excursions, hotels, you know, whatever made it a fantastic trip for you.
And although the primary objective of today's Zoom is to give you ideas on things that can be done virtually, we're also noticing, depending on where you live in the country, that different people are open to different forms of interaction. We have clients that are hosting very small groups in person, like a wine and a cheese event in their open air backyard or on their rooftop, where these are people they know well. Everyone feels comfortable with one another. No one has COVID symptoms. We keep the groups in like 6 or 8, no more than 8 people. So everything is very manageable. We've also had clients that are huge poker players or game players. And so they'll have a small group over to some kind of an outdoor event to where people can socially distance. You can wear a mask if that's how you feel most comfortable. But on the most human level, we seek that in-person human connection. And you may be surprised how many people in your network are tired of being quarantined. And if they're given an alternative, a safe alternative, a measured alternative, they may take you up on the option. A lot of times we'll advise our clients, as you're proactively reaching out and connecting with those that are the most important to you at this point in your practice, give them a few options. If I'm reaching out to Gail and I'm saying, hey, Gail, would love to get an update on you. Do you want to jump on a phone call? Should we grab a Zoom? Or do you want to meet at a local Starbucks and we'll walk around the block and catch up that way? And giving different people options is a great way, I think, of being thoughtful, and also letting them choose their own adventure. If they do feel comfortable getting in person, nothing could be better from a relationship perspective than to have that one-on-one in-person experience. If they're not comfortable with that, and they're happy with a phone call, then that's what will have to suffice until we can do something a little bit more meaningful. Particularly for those marketing professionals that are on the call today, these are the kind of issues, the kind of ideas that your practitioners at your firm need to hear about. Don't wait for them to come to you and say, you know what, I'm kind of at my rope's end as to what I can do to stay top of mind with my network. Do you have any ideas? Think proactively about different things that may work for your culture, that may work for the area of the country that you live in. You might have to do some research as to different opportunities that exist for your attorneys, accountants, business managers to participate in, but be proactive about coming up with some of this stuff. Get on the line with another marketer, another team member in another city, maybe a coach or a vendor that you use regularly, and say, hey, I got no more ideas. I want to continue to add value to those for whom I serve. Can we talk about some different things that may be available? And just put a laundry list together of different ideas, and then provide those to those for whom you serve, and let them think about what would be most appropriate for the contacts in their network. Okay, Lana, let's go to our next poll. Here we go, folks. Which of the below have you attended or been invited to? Of the ideas that we shared, we're kind of interested in how creative people are getting in terms of inviting you or the practitioners at your firm to different stuff.
So Jim in the chat mentioned he did a happy hour with appetizers and beverages delivered to all the participants, which is fantastic. And then Terry mentioned they had a magician, which gave the attendees a chance to include their family members. I think those are two great ideas.
Why am I not surprised that alcohol seems to be the #1 category? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing. And it's one of those categories that seem to appeal to a broad base of professionals out there. So you may just have to get really creative with the interactions that you have virtually. Send people some kind of a mixology box ahead of some kind of happy hour that your firm is hosting, and make sure that part of the reveal is included in the experience overall. Don't expect people to bring their own alcohol to the event, but look for those creative ways of doing whatever you're used to doing and thinking to yourself, how can I take this up a notch, either for me personally or for those within my firm that are looking to make those connections.
All right, well, here are the results. So I think it's helpful to see kind of what isn't common if you want to differentiate yourself. We have a few more people in the chat mentioning online trivia and pizza party, a book club with female founders. I think these are awesome. All right, great.
Yeah, and what I mean by part of the reveal, folks, the experience of everything that we're suggesting here, from reaching out to people ahead of time, asking them what kind of Chardonnay they want to drink at the cooking class, to understanding what's going to be packed in their little beverage box. Have the entire start to finish be part of the activity that you're proposing. Not everything has to be totally prepared and ready for someone once the virtual interaction starts. Let some of the logistics and some of the housekeeping issues, if you want to call them that, be part of the overall interaction. People really seek genuine, authentic experiences right now. And part of that preparation is super, super authentic to the experience. Okay, now let's review some ideas in terms of, you got this network, you're looking for different ways of staying top of mind, letting them know that you're a resource, keeping it fresh, keeping it relevant to them so that they don't get bored with your outreach or think to themselves, why the heck am I hearing from this guy again? One of the opportunities that are before you is for your practitioners to think about needs that people in their network are going to have before those people contact the practitioners. If you've got lawyers that do real estate transactions, once this PPP money ends, you know that there are going to be tenants that can't pay their bills. Get ahead of that if you haven't already. You know that people are going to have healthcare issues. You know that people are going to have childcare issues. All of these things can be thought of ahead of time if you'll get your group together and brainstorm as a practice or as an industry, what are our clients and contacts and referral sources likely to be experiencing 30, 45, 60 days from now, and how do we get in front of that with them? If they have to contact you, you've waited too long to be a true resource to people in your network. And so I don't think that all of the anticipation, all of that weight has to be borne by you individually. Get a group of people together and brainstorm what may be coming down the pike, and then get that webinar put together, get that article written, get that client alert together, find other people in the business community that can nicely round out the topic so that it's not just law, or it's not just accounting, or it's not just business management, but you try to give people kind of a holistic perspective as it relates to whatever the topic is. Also remember, within your firm, if you're in a bigger organization, you got tons of bright colleagues in different practices who serve different industries and different size clients. Encourage them and enlist them in the cause as well. This doesn't just have to be exclusively about you. And then be proactive about reaching out. Make sure that your outreach is timely. Make sure that you're not suggesting strategies now that you should have been suggesting in March. All of these things move very quickly, and so it's not often that you can sit on something for too long. If your in-house business development or marketing person comes to you with a suggestion, don't put them off for a month or 45 days. Circle the wagons, circle the resources, and find ways to get it off the ground.
I think on the proactive side as well, there's things that we can't predict. You know, maybe you have clients affected by the fires. Making sure you're the first one to make those phone calls versus, you know, spending your time getting the white paper or the client alert out is going to be much more effective. So you want to be the one making those first calls when something unexpected happened. So the next thing is being prepared. You know, we want to avoid awkward conversations. So before your calls, do your best to be prepared. So that you sound informed and have talking points. Easy topics to keep the conversation going. I think it's important to do a quick Google search or look them up on LinkedIn to see what's happening, what's the latest going on with them. So, you know, maybe they're raising money for Alzheimer's, or they were recently quoted in the Business Journal. Noticing these things and bringing them up will make your contacts feel like you care about them and you're paying attention, and it'll give you easy things to talk about. It's helpful to
a lot of times on those outreach, we're always worried and full of anxiety as to what we're going to say kind of at the beginning of the interaction so that we come across as human and we're not tone deaf. All of that preparation, folks, will give you great fodder for coming up with something that's a little better than, geez, are you close to a fire right now? Geez, are your lung burning because of all the ash and the bad air quality? That kind of stuff is, I guess, okay at a very basic level. But taking it to the next level and letting people know that you're paying attention and you know what's going on based on what they've shared gives you a much more meaningful interaction. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought that was important to point out.
I agree. And writing it down, you know, having a little bit of a note in front of you on an agenda of how you'd like the call to go and potential next steps makes these calls go a lot smoother. I think given the current circumstances, being creative is more important than ever. As I mentioned, frequency of touches is really important, but no one wants to get, you know, every 3 weeks an email saying, hey, let's touch base. So figuring out how to vary your outreach is really important. Some of our clients are already doing or have done their November, December client holiday gifts. Obviously that's going to get you noticed if you're sending a gift in, you know, September or October, but you want to make sure that your gift is thoughtful and specific to the recipient. Anything that you send is going to get noticed now that, you know, we're all kind of on our computers and everything is virtual. Using the post to send a book or a handwritten note is another nice way to be a little different and to get noticed.
If there's a fifth one that we could add to this too, Lana, and it was brought up in the chat, everyone is trying to keep their jobs and to look good for those that they serve. And so if you're really stumped about what you can do to stay top of mind, think about people specifically in your network and ask yourself, what could I do to make them look good in front of those for whom they report to? Is it, you know, at no charge, bringing people together and having a brainstorm session? Is it some other solution that you can provide, an article that you can forward, some kind of a white paper or report that could be important to that business? Maybe it's benchmarking and letting them know, listen, for other companies of your size in your industry, this is what they're currently experiencing. How are you calibrating that? Are you better than them? Are you worse off than them? Are you kind of right there in the middle? Thinking about what would look others in your network look good will always give you ideas on how to stay top of mind.
And Samina asked in the chat, which I think is a good question, how do you ask people for their home address? Because obviously, you know, you don't want to send your edible arrangements to an office that nobody goes to. So, you know, I've had success just letting people know, hey, I have something that I thought you would enjoy. Are you receiving mail at the office or at your home? Jonathan, have you had any different success?
Yeah, the other thing that I'll ask is, I've got something I'd like to send. Will you provide me with your mailing address? Sometimes we hear home address and we immediately think this is kind of creepy. What are they trying to do? But if you actually use the term mailing address, that could be any number of things. And by default, if I'm not comfortable doing that, I've also noticed there are a fair amount of professionals that will go into their office maybe once a week to check mail or to pick something up or to sign something. Worst case scenario, you can always have it sent to the office. And as long as it doesn't expire too quickly, the person is likely to get it. Okay, switching topics just a little bit. We'd like to talk about Zoom etiquette. By no means do Lana and I suggest that we are the video call police, but we have seen a lot of stuff in the last 6 months, folks, that is not right. And so we want to show you a few pictures. Don't worry, they're appropriate for all audiences. But we essentially want you to think to yourself, what would you hire this person for? Give us the first one, Lana.
Based on a first impression.
Yeah, based on a first impression.
So here we have somebody dressed in a suit and tie with a tropical background. This is one of those video backgrounds. So the trees are waving behind him on this beautiful island location. All right.
Next one. Here we have a tiny little man. Either the grass in his backyard has not been mowed in more than 6 months, or the proportions are all wrong here. So what would you hire him for?
I love these coming in.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think this is a parachuter, isn't it? You've got a very dark background. You can't see the person's face. The perspective behind him or her, whoever it is kind of interesting. It's really more distracting than anyone else. Yeah, I think Hitman is probably this person's best choice. Good point.
So this is, you know, this is a decision that somebody made as far as the lighting and the background. And we're really just looking at kind of what this means to you when you see this as your first impression. Okay.
And here's the final one that we want to bring up. Someone that is clearly in their residence. They seem to be animal lovers. They got the door to their bathroom open, which is always fun to experience for all of us on the Zoom.
They're sitting on their bed.
I like the flowers in the background. Those look nice, Lana.
So this is my husband, and you could choose any of the options for this person because he would do all three. Just kidding about the gigolo part. All right, we'll end the polling.
Essentially what we're trying to get at, folks, is even during COVID, even while working remotely, first impressions still matter. People will make up their mind within about the first 4 seconds of whatever they see. If the background is complementary to what you do as a professional, if you're well lit, if the camera angle and position is appropriate, having the camera below your chin is never a good option. I don't care how big or how small you are. It's just not a good practice. Other things, Lana?
Yeah, I mean, these things are things you can easily Google to see kind of what the best presentation is, but definitely, you know, what I'm noticing is people are not paying attention to their lighting, which can give them kind of a spooky presence on Zoom, which is not something that you want, specifically on first time introductions over a call. And, you know, the angle, you want to put your best self forward. So kind of having the camera above your eye line is always helpful. But specifically to the background, really what you want to do is avoid distractions. I definitely see a lot going on behind people in some Zoom calls, and it takes away from whatever the person is saying. And then also, like, if you are doing a Zoom call in your bedroom, but you would never invite that person into your bedroom, it's probably best to make sure that is, you know, your bed is not in it, or your bathroom's not in it. So the rule of thumb is if you wouldn't bring that person into that room, make sure that it doesn't look like they're in that room with you. And if you can't, then use a digital background and choose something that represents who you are as a professional.
Good point. Lana and I have seen naked people walk across the background. We've seen people set up in bed, and you see like the look of someone next to them move from time to time as they're on the Zoom. I mean, it's really very entertaining, but from a business perspective, it's akin to having the lobby or your office look like the image that's up on the screen right now.
And we didn't mention eating, but generally eating when you're having a first meeting. I mean, I watched someone down a bunch of chicken wings on a group meeting, and it's very distracting. So anything that is taking away from kind of how you present yourself as a professional, try to avoid it.
This situation that you see now is the equivalent of you having bad Zoom hygiene. I don't think this is something that any of us would aspire to. And even though you work in a very casual environment, or your clients don't expect things to always be totally professional. I was on a call the other day with a client, and she said, well, I work with a bunch of movie people that are in shorts and t-shirts. You know, they don't want me to show up in a suit. I get all of that, but you need to look like the professional that you are. And if you're billing out at $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 an hour, and your Zoom looks like this, at some point it's going to set up a red flag in the person's mind, and they're going to think, is this person legit? What's going on here? Particularly if it's a first impression.
Right. So our point is how you appear matters. So whether or not you want to deal with it, that's another story. So these are just guidelines on how to help you show up on video in a way that conveys the true professional that you are. Okay. So best practices around video, suggest video calls. As I already mentioned, you know, 70% of communication is nonverbal. 35%, you're 35% more likely to get a yes when you're face-to-face than over email or phone calls. So whenever you are setting up some kind of communication with a client or a prospect or someone you're trying to further a relationship with, make sure that you're suggesting a video call.
You also have to bring one step level of energy more than you normally would, because it is virtual. You know, maybe you're used to not paying a whole lot of attention. Maybe you're not used to having to be on more often than not. But whenever you're not in person, I think it's important to always project just a step or a half a step more in terms of energy than you normally would. Otherwise, people may think you're uninterested. They may think that you're bored by the discussion. And even if you are, we don't want to communicate that.
So log in early. I suggest 5 to 7 minutes early just to make sure you're set up. I feel like every time I do an update on my WebEx software, it screws up all my settings for Zoom. So you just don't want to get on a call and you're the person frazzled by the technology because you can't get your audio to work.
Also, we encourage you to have some kind of an objective or outline to the meeting. If you can send that to the people ahead of time, that will keep people kind of focused. If anyone gets off topic or off target, it's easy to be able to say, hey, listen, we're trying to stick to the agenda. We'll put that on the agenda for next week, or let's talk about that offline. But having an agenda, make sure that you achieve the objective that you originally scheduled the meeting for.
So one thing that I've noticed for myself and the people that I work with, now we don't have to drive in between meetings and we can stack all of our meetings. So I think it's important to remember to have bumper time in between your meetings so that you can download what just happened, figure out next steps, assign your to-dos, and then get ready mentally for the next meeting. So, the fact that we can have all these meetings is a plus, but be mindful of what you're losing in the time that you're not meeting, where you would usually have time to think and process and act.
The last point that we want to make before we close is this idea of how do we initiate a new relationship altogether when most of us are virtual? The times of just running into somebody at a networking event or just running into them at the office or going to a restaurant in between meetings or something like that just doesn't seem to happen anymore. Going to a conference, going to some kind of a formal annual networking event that you're used to attending just doesn't happen. And so let's talk, Lana, about a few ways that we can continue to introduce people into our network and be a resource to someone new altogether.
Right. So initiating new relationships is definitely one of the most challenging things people are finding in today's marketplace. So the first step is identifying who your target professional is. The more narrow that person is, the better. So when you're hyper specific, it's a lot easier to figure out how to connect with that person. So if I'm a cyber law attorney and I want to focus on hospitals and their data protection, figuring out who the decision makers within a hospital organization is going to make it a lot easier for me to find those individuals or get introductions to those types of people.
Yeah, and asking for introductions from people that you know well is a great way of expanding your network. Having that, for lack of a better term, relationship broker be the one to say, hey, Jonathan, I want to introduce you to Lana. Lana, Jonathan does X, Y, and Z. We've known each other for a number of years. Our families have even vacationed together from time to time. By the way, Jonathan, Lana does X, Y, and Z. And here's why I think the two of you should meet. If you as the relationship broker can do that, other people will start doing it for you too. And you'll start to notice that your sphere starts to expand with people who you've never met in person, or maybe you've seen across the room at a prior event. But now we're starting to solidify some of those contacts and you're getting a foothold in to them as new relationships.
So we've talked a lot about preparing for the meeting. And of course, when you're meeting with a new person, you want to prepare even more. So again, make sure you're doing your research, finding whatever commonalities that you can to have talking points. And again, outline your agenda and come up with potential next steps.
Another idea is to come up with value propositions. What are things that you're able to solve for an individual or a company? And how do you position them so that as you're reaching out and you're saying, hey, if you're like a lot of the other real estate clients that we have, you're probably dealing with X, Y, and Z. we've created a checklist, or we've created a webinar, or we have something of value to provide you that will be of a tremendous resource. But you got to be proactive about it. You can't wait for them to ask. You've got to go to them and say, I've got this resource. Can I send you a copy of it? Can I email it to you and we can jump on a phone call next week and we can talk about how this will specifically impact your business? That's a great value proposition. And if you can do it proactively, you may just create some new matters for yourself.
So lastly, you want to make sure that you wrap up the meeting with clear next steps. So either think of them ahead of time as to possibly how you could offer some value in moving forward. I generally try every time I meet someone to at least think of someone I could introduce them to. But you just don't want to wrap up the meeting without knowing what you're going to do next. And if you can't think of anything, you can ask the person that you're speaking with what they suggest as next steps.
In closing, folks, we know that we've thrown a lot of different ideas and concepts at you today. That was the point of the video. At the end of the day, ideas are easy. Where the rubber really hits the pavement is in the execution. If you've got internal marketing and business development professionals at your organization, use them more than you've ever used them before. They're tremendous resources. They've probably seen and heard and done a lot. And tapping into their wisdom will only benefit your practice. If you don't have those internal resources, look externally for coaches or trainers or others that are able to help you not only brainstorm ideas that will work specifically for you and your culture and your style, but who can also help you on the implementation side. You should be busy billing time. Let those of us who have other specialties and other disciplines work with you on what we do best.
So I wanted to let everyone know that our programs are now completely virtual. So I have one last poll. If anyone is hopefully you enjoyed this, and if you are interested in future webinars, I'd love to know what topics would be of interest. So I'm gonna do one last poll. Sorry, I know that was a lot of polls. Here we go. So just let us know if there's any of these topics that you would be interested in a similar type of webinar. And I did want to mention back to the Zoom hygiene. Someone mentioned, kids popping in, or the doorbell ringing and your dog's barking. These are things that make these human communications, and I don't think that, it really takes away from the meeting if you've done your best to kind of avoid anything distracting. So, these are just general guidelines, and a lot of this becomes habitual where you set yourself up in the best possible way, and then things happen and technology fails and your kids come in anyway, and that's okay. So it's more just how do we prepare for the best outcome.
Thank you, folks. Have a great remainder of the day. Appreciate your time.